Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, we're talking about Xbox One emulation with WinDurango. Now, we talked about WinDurango just the other day, and it was a massive breakthrough that they were able to boot Minecraft. Now, pressing a button crashed the game, but it doesn't appear that that's the case anymore. It appears they've made even more progress. So over on Twitter, they've posted Minecraft in action, the game running. WinDurango is on GitHub. It's 100% free. It's open source. And if you're interested in learning more about it, like everything I talk about, link will be in the description below at the bottom. On top of that, they are encouraging people interested in WinDurango to join their Discord. Next up, we're talking about a fairly new but very exciting version of Linux, and that is Bazzite. For those who may not be aware, Bazzite OS is based on Fedora, and it looks very similar to SteamOS. If you've got a Steam Deck and you've tried out Bazzite, you should be right at home with this distribution. Bazzite is a great option for people who don't have access to SteamOS, for example, devices that don't have access to SteamOS, and also for desktop PCs and laptops. Now, in my opinion, and feel free to disagree with me in the comments below, but I think I'm right about this one. Bazzite is very similar to something like Nobara, another gaming distribution. Both are based on Fedora, where Nobara is based on Fedora Workstation, and you can really configure things at a system level. Bazzite is a little bit more locked down and safeguarded against that stuff based on Fedora Atomic. And that's one area where I think Bazzite really shines for the average user, not necessarily the power user. And in fact, I even think Glorious Eggroll, the person behind Nobara, has helped out Bazzite in a number of different areas. And to be fully honest with you here, in a previous video I said I was going to be using Nobara for the next few months as my main distribution. However, I'm still using Nobara, but at the same time here, I'm also using Bazzite. I was so interested with Bazzite 41 that I decided to also install it on my main rig, and I absolutely love it. I think it's a really, really good Linux distribution and one to definitely check out. Anyways, here, Bazzite seems to be sticking around, even though SteamOS is growing. Now, I am surprised that Bazzite has actually had to answer this question, and a lot of people have been asking about Bazzite and what's going to happen with it now that SteamOS is expanding, given the fact that Bazzite is designed to kind of mimic SteamOS in a number of different ways. And Bazzite isn't going anywhere, and I love to hear that. There is an AMA and a response over on Reddit, and I do recommend checking it out and reading the entire thing. I would be surprised if Bazzite stopped development because of the expansion of SteamOS. To me, that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense given the fact that they put a lot of effort into it. And my own personal opinion that the desktop experience in Bazzite is well above what SteamOS is. In my opinion, Bazzite is leaps and bounds ahead of SteamOS. From a gaming perspective, SteamOS is amazing, but from a desktop user perspective, I would say that Bazzite is a lot better. And I can confidently say that considering I was using a Steam Deck as my main PC for a long while, just for fun when I was taking it camping with me. Anyways, here, Bazzite is awesome. I do recommend checking it out, and I'm glad it's staying. Next up, we're talking about a very interesting Sonic fan game on the Sega Sony PlayStation. It's called Sonic XA. Now, XA stands for Subscribe to Mr. Sujano, or possibly an audio format that PlayStation uses. So the developer behind this one says Sonic the Hedgehog XA is an open source fan game created as an exploration of the PlayStation hardware's capabilities and limitations. It serves as a proof of concept, demonstrating that a Sonic game could be developed from the ground up for this console. The project is non-commercial and has been developed by a single individual, driven by passion and experimentation. And as for the game itself, it blends classic 2D Sonic gameplay with the unique possibilities of the PlayStation, offering a fresh take on the series. And it's intending to re-image the Sonic experience on the hardware that was never intended to it, all while respecting the spirit of the original games. And the developer also says this is a prototype and highly unfinished. It is available on itch.io. It is 100% free, and if you are curious and wanted to learn more about it, again, like everything I talk about, link is in the description below. And speaking about developers, next up we're talking about Xbox, and Xbox plans on having another developer direct on January 23rd. They say join us on January 23rd for an exclusive deep dive into some of the exciting games coming to Xbox in 2025. And exclusive is a very interesting term here. Now, yes, an exclusive deep dive, but their games seem to be getting less and less exclusive. At least that's the intent. In the last video on this channel, we talked about the recent rumors about Xbox trying to bring Halo as well as Microsoft Flight Simulator to the Switch 2, as well as the PlayStation 5. And it turns out that Final Fantasy VII Remake may be heading to the Xbox, and Xbox might also be bringing Gears of War to the Switch and PS5. Now, at this point in time, it is all speculation, but it does line up to what Phil Spencer has been saying about Xbox. So we'll have to wait and see on this one, and we'll definitely have to wait and see if the Switch 2 hardware will be able to run this stuff very well. It seems like it might. And speaking about the Switch 2, next up we're talking about CES and the Switch 2. Now, during CES, Genki had a 3D printed model of the potential upcoming Switch 2. And it turns out Nintendo's lawyers also attended CES and they visited Genki. Nintendo shortly came to their CES booth with lawyers asking them what's up, and Genki responded that they did nothing wrong, never signed an NDA. Now, I am not the first person to report on this. I would argue based on the timing, I'm pretty much late to the party on the matter. It seems to have been reported in a whole bunch of different areas and discussed by a bunch of different people. Anyways, the rumors have started with a French journalist discussing the matter. And there are a couple of very interesting things I want to highlight here. So the first thing here, where there's smoke, there's fire. And I am very surprised to see that Nintendo sent lawyers to CES to go after Genki. I mean, that to me tells me the design of the Switch 2 might be a real thing. The fact that Switch lawyers were confronting Genki about it. If they were that serious, then well, that's a lot of smoke and there's probably fire. Anyways, here on top of that, Genki has said that they haven't signed an NDA, and these appear to have been built based on mock-ups that have already leaked. So Genki may be not necessarily a first-party leaker per se. Now, I don't know about you, but to me this gives me the opposite reaction of where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, if Genki is, well, they're building stuff based on leaked documentation that has been out there, that tells me that there's probably a lot of other accessory manufacturers using that leaked stuff that haven't signed an NDA that don't know the official design. They're all building stuff off leaks and they all may be incorrect. So on one hand, Nintendo's lawyers being there to confront Genki is huge. On the other hand, the fact that Genki is kind of admitting they haven't signed an NDA and these were not official things sent to them from Nintendo, they're going based on leaks. Well, that also tells me that this could be very interesting when we see the Switch 2. The Switch 2 potentially could look nothing like what we've seen so far. But on the other hand here, the fact that Nintendo lawyers were there kind of tells me that this is the upcoming Switch 2. I could be wrong. Feel free to let me know your thoughts below. Now, on a quick side note here, relevant to the Switch, but maybe not necessarily the Switch 2, we really don't know there. Anyways, there is another leak that Overkill.wtf is reporting that the leak suggests there was a plan to bring the Virtual Console to the Nintendo Switch. I think that would have been amazing. So the Virtual Console application was codenamed Clipper. Now, this is all rumor, so take all of it with a very big grain of salt, multiple very big grains of salt. Even the Switch 2 stuff we talked about previous is all rumor. Anyways, it appears that there were a few different reasons why Nintendo never brought the Virtual Console to the Switch. One of those reasons may have been money. I mean, you can charge people again for buying the exact same games. And two, maybe it was very difficult to code stuff so the games ran very well on the Switch. And maybe that's why they're trickling out games for the Switch as opposed to releasing a whole bunch at once. Who knows here? A lot of this is speculation and rumor. Next up here, we're talking about something very interesting for the Atari 2600 and arguably also interesting for game preservation. A brand new game for the 2600 has been discovered. It was unreleased, it was a prototype, and it was called Fish from back in 1983. If you wanted to see the game in action in all of its glory, I do recommend checking out Into the Vertical Blank's YouTube channel. He's got an almost 3-minute long video on the gameplay of this game. In the game, you've got to eat stuff, you've got to avoid stuff, you've got to avoid bigger fishes, and for an Atari game, it does look very interesting. I would even argue for a mobile game nowadays, it offers more content than some of them out there. Next up, we're talking about games done quick, and there's a couple very cool things that have happened this year. First and foremost, Awesome Games Done Quick 2025 has raised a total amount of $2,556,305 for Prevent Cancer. This is a hugely successful fundraiser, and I'm very glad to see the amount of success they've got this year. And secondly here, there's a video I do recommend checking out. I mean, it's Crazy Taxi live with a backing band. So Chuckles 825 was playing Crazy Taxi, and instead of trying to avoid copyright claims by just muting all of the music in games, they brought in a real band to play. The whole story behind the thing is super interesting, and the whole performance, I would say, is pretty awesome. Crazy Taxi is a really good game with a really good soundtrack, and it was really, really, really cool just to see all of this happen. I think this performance turned out really well. I said really a whole lot. And absolutely no surprise here, it was one of the many highlights of Games Done Quick this year. I mean, the performance, the execution, the idea behind it, and even the speed run was all very impressive, and they hosted an AMA about the whole thing over on Reddit. The group performing the music is spread across the US. They have to practice online together, and I think this was one of their first, if not their first, live performance together. It was super, super cool, and overall I think the video is worth checking out and watching. And someone here says, that was incredible, Tony Hawk game next. And they say Tony Hawk Run did sound pretty empty with no sound. So maybe, just maybe, we'll see this executed again. Next up, we're talking about a brand new MOBA that's being met with interesting reactions. So this one we knew was in development. It's codenamed Gummy Bears, and it's a Smash Bros. MOBA hybrid game. It was being developed by Bungie, but appears it's now being developed by a new PlayStation studio. Now, if you haven't heard about this game before, I don't blame you. It's kind of been low-key and flying under the radar. It isn't ready for release just yet, and I've got no idea when the release date is going to be on this one. And it's a MOBA with Smash Brothers-like elements. It's supposed to have a lo-fi vibe and is geared towards a younger audience. If you wanted to learn more about this game, you can check out the article over on the Game Post. And I've seen a lot of interesting reactions here. Some people are saying it's going to be another Concord, dead on arrival. A lot of people seem to be very hesitant to be excited about this one, if that makes sense. We'll have to wait and see here. I haven't seen any gameplay just yet. But I'm assuming since news of this is still out there, it's still in development, then we're probably going to be seeing some gameplay relatively soon. I could be wrong. And speaking about unreleased stuff, next up here we're talking about the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra. Another year, another generation of this smartphone, and Ultra design has been leaking. Now, it should be a surprise to absolutely no one that Samsung is creating a Galaxy S25 and S25 Ultra. And here is the Ultra. It's on the far right there compared to the previous versions. It appears they're going with rounded corners. I actually kind of like that direction. I mean, holding it may be a little bit more comfortable. As for official unveiling of the Galaxy series of phones, I think we're really not going to have to wait too much longer. I think Samsung does it towards the end of January. If you are curious about these, you'll have to be patient, but you're not going to have to wait for too much longer. And speaking about hardware, next up we're talking about the FPGA space. Now, we've talked about the FPGA space a lot recently, with Take Udon making splashes in the space to make things more affordable. Well, check this out. Introducing the FPGA Tang retro game console, smaller than an SNES joystick. Supports NES, SNES, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Mega Drive, Amiga, and more. Starting at just $69. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a release date for you just yet on this one. I haven't seen one in person to test it out, and I haven't seen anyone else test these out yet. But at the same time here, it does seem to be a pretty unique product, and one that I think a lot of people will like based on the price of this. And I'm very curious to see the full system list that this chip will support after everything is said and done here. But they say currently it uses a button to switch the core. So it seems like some things may be a bit rough around the edges, but I mean, at the same time, based on the price point, I don't think a lot of people would complain. And speaking about things people are excited about, next up we're talking about Marvel Rivals, at least on PC. So Marvel Rivals, ever since this game launched, has been incredibly popular. It is free to play, and that may help out things in general. But at the same time here, if you take a look at the overall numbers, they are surprising. So according to SteamDB, Marvel Rivals has peaked at 644,269 concurrent players, people playing at the exact same time, on January 11th, 36 days after release. And this puts the game in very elite company. So taking a look at the top all-time peak games over on SteamDB, and Marvel Rivals is sitting right now in 14th. And that is based on every game that has released over on Steam on PC, and that is very elite company. I mean, in the last 24 hours here, Marvel Rivals is sitting in 4th place with over 522,000 people playing the game. This game continues to be popular, and although it's got a relatively short track history at the same time here, these numbers are impressive. The development team seems to be very active, and I'm curious to see if these numbers continue to grow. And last up here, we're talking about the upcoming Intel Arc B570, or possibly the already released Intel Arc B570. It appears these video cards are popping up in different vendors. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, the Intel Arc B580 is in a pretty good price to performance bracket, offering quite a bit of performance for a reasonable price based on comparables in the market. We'll have to wait and see here for the B570 in terms of overall success, but the B580 seems to be a pretty hot ticket item, and I'm assuming the B570 is also going to be very popular. If you're in the market for these, you may want to keep your eye out here. And just for reference, the person who bought these bought 2 of them, but they said here they're upgrading their son's PC from a GTX 1080, and these are not being scalped. And on a side note here, if you're one of the lucky few to get your hands on one of these, getting it to work may be a different story altogether, considering they haven't officially dropped just yet. Anyways, here someone says, you have to get creative to get drivers working on those. The installer likely won't work, but at least one other B570 user was able to manually point Windows to the unpacked driver directory via the card's device manager properties. It reports as a B580 and should get you going until Intel updates with the launch drivers. And on a side note, if you're wondering how much these cost, the person who bought one said they cost $237.60 with tax. That is under $250. So although we don't know real-world performance numbers and experiences just yet, at the same time here, under $250 seems like it may be a good bargain. Let me know your thoughts about that price. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. We talked about a bunch today. Feel free to discuss anything we talked about in the comments below. If you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button. Check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate. Save your state.